we are going through an evolutionary bottleneck, which means a lot of species are going to disappear, never to reappear again. And in time, others will show up to replace them, but it's going to be a while. So, and this mass extinction that we're experiencing right now is actually mostly due to the activities of human beings on the planet. We've taken over most of the biosphere, commandeered resources, diverted lots of pathways that were regenerating ecosystems. Now we're experiencing the consequences of that, which are just getting started. That's something most people have not quite grasped yet, that this profound change, which is going to be going on for a long time, and whose trajectory will be solely determined by the behavior of human beings, whether it takes 300 years to recover or 30 years to recover. It's entirely up to the decisions of individual human beings made every day. Every decision that every human makes is going to affect how long the process will take of deconstructing the world that we've known and constructing a new one. Well, this leads to a rather interesting observation. You can find brilliant people everywhere. Seriously. The world is full of geniuses. When you look for intelligent human beings, there's no shortage of them. The world is full of marvelous human beings. You see them all the time. They're on TikTok, they're on TED Talks, right? They're everywhere. They're in music videos, they're streaming live. I mean, there's thousands, millions, tens of millions, who knows, an uncountable number of super intelligent human beings on this planet right now. There is. There's like no shortage of them. But collectively, we're stupid as hell. It's a strange phenomenon, but it's just an observation. The individual human beings are brilliant. I mean, the lowest human being is still a marvel of creation. Is still full of fantastic realities and abilities and potentials. And the most advanced humans are really belong in another age altogether. They don't even fit into the normal categories that we apply to human beings. They're so exceptional. But that's the future. They're kind of a harbinger of a future that lies in wait for humanity. But ahead of that future, which is marvelous, wonderful, fantastic, and way beyond what the most utopian vision of human development has ever encompassed. That's the future that lies in wait for us. But first, there's this evolutionary bottleneck that we have to go through before we get there. Okay, and it's totally up to us how that plays out. Really, we're not victims. Of a changing climate. We are the creators of the changing climate. We have changed the climate, unintentionally perhaps, but not unknowingly. There were those who knew 50 years ago, they knew definitively that the combustion of fossil fuels at the rate that was ongoing and growing would have an effect on climate. That was a known, that was a fact. And the oil companies themselves actually paid for that information, and then they owned it. So, and they kept it to themselves. They didn't spread the news. So here we are 50 years later, and the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has doubled, and the rate of heating of the Earth has doubled, and lots of things have tripled, and guess what? You know, we're past the point of no return to whatever it was that we consider to be our normal climate in the last few centuries. Is not coming back. It's over. It's done with. It's no more. It's just a memory and a bunch of statistics. We are now in a new climate regime, which is going to demand exceptional resilience and capacity for foresight and planning if large numbers of human beings are going to survive. It's a potential catastrophe of epic proportions, biblical proportions, even past biblical, because there never were so many people on the world. 7.5 billion or something, and counting. There's lots, plenty. And anyway, humans reproduce rapidly. Don't worry, even if 90% of the human race gets
falls through the cracks
and fails to survive, to reproduce, the remaining 10% can repopulate the planet in 4 or 5 generations. Really, that's all it takes. A couple of 100 years, and boom, they'll be back to 6 billion again. So not to worry, but it's up to individuals how they, or whether they would like to continue to participate in the evolution of this planet. Each of us makes that choice. We know that the numbers of human beings on the planet is far in excess of what the planet can support comfortably using current technology. That's just a fact. That's another fact that's been known for about 50 years. The Club of Rome report, Limits to Growth, 1972. It's not like any of this stuff is news. If people didn't want to pay attention, fine. They didn't have to. Nobody was forcing them to pay attention. But their lack of attention has resulted in a climate which is going to change drastically, continuously, and even unpredictably for the unpredictable future. Okay, so that's just a fact. And now, what are you going to do about it? Okay, that's the big question.
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it?
Hey, it's you. You got us into this.
Hey, you. You need to do something about this.
I did do something about it.
What did you do?
I do. I created Whole Village. That was my solution to the pending crisis, multiple crises, which are going to slowly tear our current civilization to shreds and put it back together differently than it is now. It's kind of like, the caterpillar. Caterpillar grows and grows and grows. All he can think about is growing and growing. That's all caterpillars are about, right? Growth. It's all about growth, just like humans. That's what humans and caterpillars, they're all about growth, growing more. I want more. I got to eat more. I'm getting bigger. I can take bigger bites. I can consume more. And I'm bigger, and I'm bigger, and bigger. Finally, what happens to that caterpillar? Yeah. It reaches the end of its growth cycle, and it goes into a cocoon. And what happens in that cocoon? The whole caterpillar turns to mush. The whole caterpillar dissolves. It dissolves into mush, goo, and reforms as a butterfly, which then shows up as, basic phenomena. From a phenomenological point of view, a butterfly is a new creature. It's a totally different creature from a caterpillar. Yes, they happen to be connected through this transformative process, but they're really totally different organisms, right? They have different functions, in the ecosystem. They behave differently. You know, the only thing connecting them is they're made out of the same stuff. But the species, the creatures themselves, have metamorphized. Well, we're going to do that. And I don't know about the mush part, how that works out, whether we...
Well, I can get really mushy.
You know, but the human species is in that stage of where we're about to go through a metamorphosis. Okay, we've been in a stage of growth, endless growth, endless growth. We've grown even past the capacity of the planet to support our growth. We've exceeded our daily allowance of calories that we can get from, you know, natural sources, supplemented that with mining of ancient calories that were buried in the earth, right? So, and we've managed to do like 1.5 planets worth of extraction, but we only have one planet to deal with in the end. So, you know, anyway, that exuberant growth phase is now terminating, okay? And of course, that's going to be very disruptive to all of the systems that humans put in place in order to facilitate the extraction of resources from the rest of the biosphere and divert them for human purposes without paying any attention to the consequences of either the extraction, the processing, consumption of it, and the eventual waste, quote, waste stream. And since we know there's no such thing as waste, what you're doing is you're producing a toxic burden and dumping it into the biosphere, which you are then entrusting with the task of dealing with it. And because this is stuff that is new to the planet, right? People created it. Now, it's important to remember that humans cannot do anything unnatural. We are a part of nature. We're not separate. It's impossible to separate ourselves from nature in any way, shape, or form, except through an illusion of separation. You know, we depend continuously, moment to moment, second to second, for our survival on the oxygen balance in the atmosphere in a certain temperature range, right? With a certain amount of carbohydrates, proteins, and everything available to us to maintain the physical form. I mean, we're embedded in nature. You know, no matter, we may have created illusions that somehow we're isolated from nature, but it's just an illusion, believe me. We are all 100% natural. Every human being is perfectly natural, and their behaviors are perfectly natural. Of course, some behaviors might be self-destructive, both to the individual human being and to the ecosystem, which they're embedded in. Whole village. Started to talk about whole village. Yes, the whole village, which is an intentional community that I helped engineer and birth in 20 years ago already, was intended to be a response to these impending multiple crises, the pollution crisis, the energy crisis, the climate crisis, the racial injustice crisis, the separation of man from his natural environment crisis, all of those crises that were simultaneously going to seriously impact society and are already, and have been for a long time, actually. We can learn a lot from scientists. Of course, a tremendous amount. I dare say there's millions of scientists out there running around on the planet investigating every possible thing you could ever think about that might be of a significant or even of no significant interest to their fellow human beings. So they're generating an enormous amount of data every day, every second. There is no one person on the planet who has the mentality capable of processing the amount of information that is being produced every second on the planet. Right? You haven't got the time because first of all, it's all simultaneous, right? But you still wouldn't be able to do it. So how is all of this actually functioning? We observe we have what we consider to be a global civilization, right, which is fairly new, right? It came into being during my lifetime. When I was born, there was not a global civilization. The world was divided up into competing empires. There was the French Empire, there was the British Empire, there was the German Empire, which is just been dismantled. There was the Italian Empire. There were all these empires that were claiming ownership. I was born into a world divided up into empires, and a world where there were blank spots on the map. Right? Yes, they had a global map, but there were blank areas. The center of Africa was mostly blank. Amazon basin was a big blank area. Hi. These guys are huge. Those horseflies, eh?
I know.
Enormous. Where were we before we were so rudely interrupted? Well, it's this guy's run-in, after all. And this is where they should be this time of day, getting away from these pesky flies. She's a big girl. Thank you. She's a big girl. Should throw a saddle on her and take her for a ride. I'm sure she'd enjoy it.